I'd like to start by thanking Judy for putting this together. The reason I'm involved is Bob didn't know anything about PowerPoints, and I do. And I didn't know anything about bombing Nazis, and he did. So that makes us a good pair tonight. He's going to be doing the play-by-play. I'll be doing a little bit of color in between here, and trying to stay on track. When this is over, in about 45 minutes, I want to take just a break in place while I change from this program to playing a short 5-minute DVD that I think you'll enjoy as well. So with that, let's get started. This is, of course, a picture of Bob. He was a second lieutenant and a B-24 navigator in the 8th Air Force 2nd Air Division, 458th Bomb Group, 754th Squadron. I bet there's a bunch of people in this room that have some connections to a B-24. A grandfather, a father, an uncle, a husband. Raise your hand. Dozen. Look at that, about a dozen people. And what's really great about meetings like this is you heard Mary talk about our old buildings and things that are 100, 150 years old, but this is living history. Wouldn't it be great if at some time in our life we could have talked to someone who fought in the Civil War, or even World War I, or all the way back to the Revolutionary War. And maybe some of us had the opportunity, older folks that may have known somebody, at least in World War I, and never took the time to talk, or most importantly, to listen. So we're going to do a little bit of that tonight. Very briefly, the strategic bombing of Europe came mostly out of England. And it wasn't long before the bombing started that it became understood that the English would bomb at night and Americans would bomb during the day. And a lot of things have been written about strategic bombing, meaning going into the enemy's homeland, into their strongholds, destroying their communications, their railroads, their airplanes, their ammunitions, their factories that are building ball bearings and other things for the effort, oil refineries. And that's what it was all about. Coming from England, thousands and thousands and thousands of bombers every day, pounding at the heartland of Germany to beat them to submission. So with that, let's get Bob started on talking about, and pay attention to the fact that the amount of time that it took to train an individual for these sort of jobs before you actually got into combat, and also pay attention to the fact that the danger in war is not so much, it's definitely being shot at and having flak thrown at you, but simply being in these aircraft often was danger in itself. So, Bob, let's hear what you have to say.
Okay. The picture up there? Yeah. I started my training at Port Washington. I was inducted and took the interurban from Port to Milwaukee. And then this whole group was assigned in down there. Then I went to Camp Grant until I was assigned to a university. We all had university training. I was assigned to the University of Alabama, at Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We marched in the streets of Alabama, and they cut us. We sang all the way. We constantly were singing, and there was, of course, a period of Jim Crow down there, and so we had to learn a lot about not speaking to the blacks and a lot of the rules down there. We also had to, they had to train 200 pilots a month to fly 100 hours, and then a soul in a Piper Cub. You can imagine with 200 planes down there and fellows circulating around. We were assigned like a mile, a square mile out in the country, and that was our area to fly around and then train. And so you can, as he mentioned, there were a lot of accidents that were, as you ought to be aware of.
Bob was telling me that with 200 Piper Cubs on this little base, there really wasn't enough space for them all to park. They actually hung them up by their tails to save space.
Finally, after graduating from University of Alabama, I went to Ellington Field for advanced navigation, and we were, again, it was a constant pressure of learning and being in class all the time. I know one night we were on a navigation flight and came back at 2 in the morning. They got back to our base and they fed us breakfast, and we had to join the next classes at 7 o'clock in the morning. So they were in a hurry to get navigators. They were short and they wanted to rush them through. So we were always under constant pressure. In this picture of a graduation party,
It's on the screen now.
it was a wild party.
This is Bob here in the back. Somewhere in his notes I saw statistics on how many bottles of whiskey were consumed that night.
There were no textbooks for navigators, so we had to depend on knowledge from previous pilots. So there were 2 officers. There was an officer assigned for 2 cadets, and he stayed with them all the time. He was next to them in the classrooms, and when we fly 18 training flights, he was always on the plane, so they knew how you were doing, and they were passing on their information to us since there were no textbooks to go by. So it was a close relationship. I remember him real well. After all this training, we graduated as navigators, and the pilots in the back row, other 2 fellows in the back row were my pilot and the co-pilot. We assembled in Topeka, Kansas, and we were put together as a crew. The radar operator, the radio operator, the fighter pilot, gunners, and then we were given this plane that was just flown down from the Willow Run plant in Detroit, and we had our assignment was to fly it over to Europe. They were putting all these planes, a B-24 like ours, they had it down to the Willow Run plant at 56 minutes for a bomber with a 110-foot wingspan. So you can imagine, they were turning them out, but we had to get those planes over to Europe, and we had to get these crews over. So we were assigned planes and crews, and we were expecting to fly over in about 2 days and we'd be over in England fighting. We didn't have that luck.
No, he didn't.
We had,
This is Bob here on the left. He told me it was very cold that day when they took that picture. You kind of tell that on the face of these guys. His captain, John Sherwood, and his wife are buried at Arlington National Cemetery. And during all that training, you got to come home for a little bit, didn't you?
right. That was the only time I managed to get home.
That's my typo there. I had written that was at Bart's. Was that at Bart's?
Yeah, Barth. That's Walter Barth. A lot of you probably recognize Walter. And
Were there free drinks at Bart's? Aviators?
All the service. The other fellow was Bill Lobo on that picture.
Okay.
Our job was to get these new planes over to Europe, and so we took off from Topeka and flew across the United States and landed on the East Coast. This was called the North Route. You landed on the East Coast at some base there, and went up to a little farther up to Goose Bay, Labrador, and normally we were planning to fly to Reykjavik, Iceland, but we didn't have that luck. We had a fire on our plane. My father called me and said, "Do you smell something burning?" And I looked at all we had was a little heater on the floor, and I said, I didn't smell anything, but he said, "Look around," and the back was all flames between he and me. So we emptied one extinguisher, and then it went down a little, but then it came up again. We emptied a second extinguisher. Then our engineer reached in with the pliers and pulled out all the wires that he thought were causing the trouble. It subdued, but for the rest of the flight, about every 5 minutes I keep looking around to see if there were any fire. At the time, we were between Canada and Greenland, and all I could see in the ocean below us were icebergs and ice floes. They told us to land in Greenland, and we had to land at a base along the shoreline at the end of a fjord. To find the fjord, my father and I each had a pair of binoculars, and we had to look for a little wooden shack on a rock out in the ocean, and that was the right fjord to fly up to. It was a miracle that they had an airport landing strip there, because it started right at the ocean level and was uphill, and it was made of metal panels that were hooked together. We were there for a week while they took care of all the problems on the plane. From then
I guess fire on the plane was probably a direct result of the fact that you were building one of these every 56 minutes. Quality control probably wasn't extremely high. So this was a real test, unfortunately, over icebergs and then you went on after that week in, normally as Bob said, it would take 48 hours to get from mainland US to England. Well, as he'll tell you right now, it took him 48 days because he's already 7 days in and he's in Greenland. And now you finally got the plane fixed and you took off, you thought you were going to England.
right. But we said, they told us there was a blizzard in Iceland, but we should land. And we landed there, and there was a terrific blizzard. You can see the depth of the snow there. They had cables strung along so that we could hang on to get between this hut and this hut. At night we put a 100-pound bag on the floor and brace it with a pole, and the next morning the door would be blown open and there'd be a drift of about 2 feet on the floor, all in the cabin.
Bob also told me that they had to tunnel out to where the coal was kept, take the coal into the Nissen hut, and dry it in an oven before they could throw it in the stove to burn it.
We soaked it in the coal and oil, and when we started a flame in a little pot-bellied stove, it would blow out the roof 15 or 20 feet, and pretty soon the fire trucks were there.
I told Bob he was probably pretty lucky in the sense that by burning up 48 days en route to England, it probably saved him flying 15 or 20 very, very dangerous missions. And he's probably alive today because of all those happenings between the United States and Greenland and Iceland. He didn't feel that way. But any 22-year-old, he wanted to go in and get at some Germans, but it probably saved his life.
We finally made it to England, to Scotland, and there we were a replacement crew of a crew that was shot down, and there was a horse from St. Faith on the east side of England, not too far from the North Sea. They were
Yeah, they can see it on here, and they can look at it later.
England was one massive airfields. On this map, these were all American bases. The red ones were our B-24s, and the blue ones were the B-17s. But then in between were all the British bases. So I looked down, and anytime I looked down, I'd see at least 10 air bases below me.
Yeah, it was really something. And if you were hit, if you were coming back from a mission, and as you were, Bob, one time coming back on 3 engines, it was nice being on the east coast of England than further inland. Of course, in emergency, you probably could put down at a different base. All of you local people that know of Roy Harms, Roy died, of course, in North Africa, but his unit, here's Horsham St. Faith, Hartwig is right next to it. That's where he flew out of. My buddy Gary was in the back. His uncle flew out of Bury St. Edmunds, which is right down in here in the town of Wrotham. So all of these places were very close, and it was not uncommon. If you were in London on the weekend or whatever, you could run into people that you knew from back home if they were an aviator.
When I was at the University of Alabama, there was a family that knew Roy. I was going to mention it to his family. This is our air base, a typical 8th Air Force air base. You can see the runways, and we have a building our tower on the base. Ours is a permanent British base before the war, and so the British left all their buildings, their dormitories, and their equipment at this base, and this is our dining hall. On the right-hand side are the blackout blinds. They were on hinges, and they had to be closed every night. And on the doors were blackout curtains that were pulled down every night. In the background was a map of Europe, and they had a red ribbon strung down there, held by pins, and that was told us where the front line on the continent was, in case you ran into trouble or had to bail out, to try to get on the Allied side of the line. So we were always aware of it. This is, we flew a brand new plane over there with only 10 hours on it, but the new coming planes got the old planes. We were assigned this plane called Mizpah. It was a war-weary plane. It had almost 100 missions on it already. They painted a bomb on the side of the plane for every mission that the plane went on. One of the previous crews shot down 2 Nazi planes, so they have the indicating that they shot down 2 planes.
These are the bomb images that Bob's talking about here, and then the 2 swastikas are for the 2 fighter planes that were shot down. It's interesting that in all of these planes at this time of the war, and on this next picture, some of the nose art from the 458th, you'll notice a heavy piece of steel in front of the pilot's area. Like most military people given equipment to go into war, they soon find what the shortfalls are, and they do something about it. In Iraq, for instance, guys adding extra armor to their Humvees. It was no different in World War II, where they realized that the skin of this plane was just too thin in some areas, especially where people were sitting, and they added thicker pieces of metal. And in some cases, they put it right over their nose art and never bothered to repaint the words or whatever image was behind it. And believe me, I had to dig through a website and some of Bob's stuff to find 6 pictures of nose art that were suitable for a mixed audience. That's some really cool stuff.
Mizpah, everybody wonders what Mizpah means. May the Lord watch between me and thee while we are absent from one another. It's a term that we sell.
Yeah, it's an interesting phrase coming out of the Bible, but also it's ironic that Bob, being a jeweler his entire life, for those of you that don't know, those little medallions that are cut apart, and you give part to one person and one to the other, and they fit back together. That's a mizpah. And a very deep meaning, and quite different than some of the other names and nose art on the planes.
We have shoulder patches that were designed by Walt Disney. Every bomb group had a different shoulder patch.
It was amazing. Bob told me that, and I did some research on the internet, and I was very interested to see how many squadron patches in the 8th Air Force especially were designed by Disney Studios.
There's a picture of Doug Down from Fort Washington. There's some people from Fort here that probably knew Doug, and he had a brother that was a navigator too, but at another base, Leroy Down, the county policeman, and there was a third fellow from Fort. I got in there and was assigned to a room in a dormitory, and in the next room were two fellows from Fort. One was Carl Crutzer, who had, he was a bombardier on their crew, which is very unusual. They try to keep families and relatives separate. And my co-pilot in the middle of the back had a bad back, so he was at the base hospital. The hospital wasn't very fancy, and to get sunlight, they'd bring the beds right out in the sun. This picture is of Jimmy Stewart receiving an award. I saw Jimmy quite a bit over there. He was a commander of another base, but one of our crews bombed Zurich, Switzerland by mistake, and the president and the head of the Air Force wasn't too happy about it, so he wanted some publicity. So they had Jimmy conducting the court-martial, and later on, Mary and I went over to England every 4 years for a reunion at our base, and Jimmy and his wife were there at a room about 3 doors from us. He was very, very friendly. Nobody took pictures of him, and he always left his door open. He called to my roommate, a fellow. He said, "Come on and sit down. Let's talk." That's the kind of a guy he was.
Jimmy Stewart enlisted in the Army Air Corps. He tried to enlist, actually. He was 5 pounds underweight. They didn't want him. He went back in the studio and he tried to get one of the big shots to intervene for him. It didn't work. So he went to a nutritionist on the movie lot and helped him gain 6 or 8 pounds in a very short period of time and got him in. He rose from private to brigadier general in his time, and he did it very quietly. He flew 22 missions as a B-24 pilot. He stayed in the Air Force Reserve through Vietnam and retired as a brigadier general.
Now they had all these planes. They had 4 plants producing B-24s, including Little Run, and they were coming out, and they had to be brought over to Europe by our crews. It still amazes me how they assembled all these planes in that length of time. They were, we had a lot of provisions that the British didn't have. The leading edge of the plane had boots, the icer boots that would constantly grip and break up the ice and let it fly away. Our plane was a brand new plane, and we went through this ice storm, and the whole side of the plane was all dense. They had to replace one propeller and file down another one. You can see how with this picture, my pilot is in the upper corner and the co-pilot is next to him. And I was at a dome with a section. There is a desk there, but there were no chairs for the navigator. I stood all the time, sometimes 7 or 8 hours, and
Yeah, Bob said the navigators on a B-17 got to sit the whole time, but he literally stood for a flight to Eastern Germany was probably easily an 8-hour round-trip bombing run.
we had a lot of equipment too there. Afterwards, look down there, I have the oxygen mask and the oxygen and the helmet. I always had 4 wires in my uniform, plus the electric heated flying suit that was plugged in, and plus the oxygen tank. These yellow bottles on this picture are the oxygen.
These things, a lot of people see these if you visit a B-24 and crawl through it. Some very uninformed people think those are bombs or something else. Those are the oxygen tanks that help this crew live through 25,000 foot altitudes. Kind of hard to see on this photo, but the gunners here, here's the belly turret gunner. There's 2 waist gunners, one on each side here, and a tail gunner back here, all protecting the plane from fighter pilots. Actually, let's go straight to this one. Tell us what this is, Bob.
Yeah. This is I had a stack of maps about 3-4 inches. I had maps from Sweden down to Italy, all in German, and then we had, these were special maps that they had later on in the war. The country was filled with anti-aircraft batteries, and our British intelligence, these were British maps. Most people think that we flew from England directly to the target, but we had to watch out for these batteries. The outer range was the range of these batteries, about 12 miles. So we had instead of a straight flight, we had a zigzag and go avoid all these. I have some of my own lines here in the Times, and so I
Bob had a complete set of these maps. If you laid them out on the floor, it would probably take up this entire seating area. And at one of his reunions, somebody swiped one of them, right?
Right.
Yeah. So he's one map shy of a perfect set. Probably the only person in the world that would have such a thing.
I wanted to donate these to there's a big map, one of the biggest map museums in the world in Milwaukee at WWII, and I've talked to them about donating all these maps. That was called the navigator, the aerial bookkeeper. Way over on my left is what is called an E6B computer. It's a series of circles with miles on it, and there were no batteries and there were no calculators, so we had to fly with on a CD with electric, with heated gloves, and first we had a silk house, which because if you touched anything in this inside, it was 50 below when we took off in Canada, at Goose Bay, Canada. Your hands would stick to the metal, so you had to do this navigating with tweezers and so forth with gloves on.
I don't think most people realize that it's dangerous enough to fly 8 hours, half of it in enemy territory, over flak installations and things like that. But nobody, I don't think, unless you've been close to somebody who's done this, realize that at 20, 30,000 feet, it's 40 below zero. You have to stay warm. You have to keep your hands from freezing to things. You need oxygen, all kinds of things.
The electrically heated flying suit is on the right, and I plugged into the boots down below, and then you plugged into the gloves, and you had a oxygen, you had a flak vest, a 40-pound flak vest, and you had a parachute and life preserver.
And these flak vests were designed so that you could pull a ripcord and it would drop off of you. So in case you had to bail out, you weren't dealing with that extra weight as you parachuted down. And all of this, and you had to make sure you didn't drink too much coffee before you left in the morning.
So it's a very strange ship. It's called the assembly ship. When we'd take off on a mission, we'd get up about, it would all be overcast. You couldn't see the sun, but the minute you got out, the sun was out above the clouds. And but then all these 30 planes from our base would be flying around. They all looked alike, so you had to find a plane that would start this formation. And this is a plane. It was usually an World plane that they decorated up, and the fellows would line up behind that plane before they took off for the continent.
And of course, then that plane came back and landed because he didn't want the Germans laughing at you.
We taxied around our air base, and some of the planes that were in formation were up in the air already. Our planes were stored on revetments around the base, and we all had to line up, and it took about an hour and a half to assemble. By the time we got all assembled in a right position, one plane had to be a little higher than the other, and separated so you didn't fire on your friendly planes.
You can imagine that this is just one base going up, circling up 5 miles. They went over a bay called the Wash, which was just north of this part of England. And in that hour and a half, maybe 1,000 planes would group there and then head towards Germany in separate formations.
Very soon. That's what was amazed me, was how they could time all these planes, because we could just be heading for a base over Holland, and these other 3,000-4,000 planes would join us, and the idea was to be real concentrated over that island, and then we dispersed, and then the German fighter pilots couldn't concentrate on any one plane.
And you can imagine that every day somebody ran into somebody else, or tested a gun that shot too far and hit another plane, or simply crashed taking off. That's an everyday occurrence.
You'd have to be flying through overcast until you got the sunlight in. This is en route. You can see some of the bombs.
And this was the 458th. We can tell by the tail markings. From here forward, almost every ship looked alike. It was the tail marking that told you which bomb group it was.
you always had to worry about flank. Every air base had 88 bomber, German bomber on it, and it was throw out little pieces of flak, they called them, and you had to fly through that. It was a heady, there was no way out.
And that flak could range from being as big as a dinner plate or as small as a BB. But when it came through that thin shell of that plane, and it took out a hydraulic line or anything, it could hit a human being. It was amazing. In fact, this photograph wasn't necessarily the 458th, but it easily could have been your plane coming back from one of your missions, because you did lose an engine, as this guy is, from a flak hit. And then you had to limp your way back to England, probably separated from your bomb group, becoming very susceptible to enemy fighters. The good thing about Bob's missions was we had gained air superiority by that time, and the frequency of fighter planes wasn't as great, but flak was still incredibly heavy.
At that time they were bringing out the German jet plane, and one of these bases, the middle one, the Western Mars, was a jet base that we bombed.
Just briefly, you look at these, I think two of these are jet aircraft bases, and when Bob told me they bombed Royan, France on April 25th, or April 15th, just 20 days before the war ended, I must admit I questioned you. But I went on the internet and I looked, and sure enough, there was a pocket of 122,000 Germans left down in the city of Royan in Bordeaux. And since the war was not over, the 458th went there after those guys and their submarine bases and things.
14-foot walls, roofs on those submarine pennants, so they could never close them down. I remember we carried a liquid, let's see, what is the name of them? We carried APOM, and then the planes behind us had regular bombs that were supposed to ignite all this napalm, and they would get in the cracks and finally get through to the walls, but they stayed and didn't surrender for a long time.
I think it may have been the only time that napalm was used in the European theater in World War II.
Yeah, when we got back from a mission, they took pictures on the flight every 10 minutes en route on the flight, and then when we bombed, they took pictures every 10 seconds. I'd be over there in the map room, and I was able to get these pictures when the fellow conducting the critique after the mission. On the previous picture there was this little circles, and those were, you want to just flip it?
That might take me a half an hour to figure out how to go back. But the circles basically went out from 500 feet to 1,000 feet, and it ranked the accuracy of each mission. You could be in a lot of trouble if your bombs missed by a mile.
So some of the fellows like the bombardiers would say they hit this target so many times, and then when they flash the picture out, they missed it by a mile.
I think you can see the exploding bombs here. This is Regensburg, for you World War II buffs. Regensburg and Schweinfurt were probably the most bombed cities in Germany.
I was in this lab room and grabbed a bunch of pictures showing how the bombs were released.
This is another, as Bob said, when the war was over, these photographs were laying around this room, and the guy just said, "Help yourself." And he took some pretty neat pictures. A couple of them are from his missions as well.
And this is the last bombing of Europe. We were on this mission. Hitler was going to defend himself to the last from Berchtesgaden.
It's right up in.
It's up there, yeah, from Berchtesgaden. And then so he was bringing ammunition by train to this town, Bad Reichenhall, and our job was to bomb this railroad yard. These are the Southern Alps, and so
there are bombs dropping right here. Imagine living in this peaceful little village at the base of the Alps, and the war is 10 days from being over, but because Hitler decided that, and his troops decided there might be a way to hold out at the Eagle's Nest till the very end, they start massing ammunition and things there and bring this little visit on there. And this was the last bombing run of the 8th Air Force in World War II.
Down in the bottom there, we were at 21,500 feet, April 25th, 1945.
You can see a group of bombs
That's a frozen river
hitting here. Yeah, that's
April 25th in Europe. So you can see how cold it is down there.
and you can see two groupings, one hitting here and one down here. These blow-ups don't do it justice. These are very, very high-resolution photos. They're really neat to look at. This gives you an idea of what the 458th went through. I say over 200 missions. They flew exactly 240 missions in just over a year. They lost 47 aircraft, 179 men killed, 193 of them parachuted to being POWs, while 33 of them evaded, and 60 were interned in a neutral country, either Switzerland or Sweden or someplace. Tell us what this is, Bob.
I was given this award by the crews. We had to bring our plane back to the States, and so we had a regular crew of 10, plus we had to take passengers along, and the passengers were from armament and radio repairmen, mailmen, and so they were our passengers. There were no seats for them, but they had just lay on comforters on the floor in the back of the plane.
And this was to fly back to the United States, and they actually flew from England, and then again, this was supposed to be a 48-hour trip back to the United States. What happened off the coast of England?
We had our upper gunner was sitting on top of the wings, and he noticed gasoline siphoning out of on the wings. So he called in, and they told us to come back to England, and we had to just land and get a new gas cap. But then they sent us back again on that Azores flight. That was all over water. The Azores are just a little island in the middle of the Atlantic, and you had to really navigate very closely to hit this island. Over here, we went to Norwich, England on this trip back, Norwich, England, Valley, Wales, and then the Azores, and then Newfoundland, and then, where is that? Bradley Field, New Hampshire.
And this shows that it took 10 days to do that, so 48 days over and 10 days back. When we get finished here in a minute, remember this certificate, this flight of 9 crewmen and 10 passengers going back to the United States. So the war was over, and you made it in one piece and headed back to good old Cedarburg.
Yeah. Praise, I practically made all of the praise just like could walk. I remember the firing squad. Some of the fellows are here, and
Tell us about that shot on the left there.
I was in one of the 8th Air Force Society, and they wanted us to one of their meetings in our original uniforms. I managed to get in the original uniform. And these I just got my air medals. It took a while to get them. The depository for those medals burned, and the government didn't accept just any verification. They really wanted to check on them, and those arrived at one time.
And here's a picture I took of you last year or the year before in the 4th of July parade. I want to thank you, Bob, for sharing all of this with us tonight. I've got something I'd like to give you. Remember that certificate of flying back over to the United States. It's interesting what's available to us today on the internet. For those of you that aren't aware, there's a website called footnote.com. And they've now archived 80,000 pictures from just World War II. Many other things. And you can join Footnote for $60 a year and get all kinds of neat stuff. But those 80,000 pictures are free. You can go on there. So the other day I went on there and I searched the 458th bomb group. And I found 64 pictures, and I started going through them. And lo and behold, one of them was a picture taken the day that you flew home from England. And your crew of 9 people plus the 10 passengers are all on this picture.
I was glad to get this picture. I'd never seen it before.
So it was quite a mystery to me, because why are 19 guys in this photograph? And I went to the 458th Bomb Group website and started to become a pen pal with their historian. And as soon as I showed him this picture, he knew exactly what it was. And on the back, there's a copy of the MISPA certificate on there.
Thank you. We all had our liquor supply at the officers' club, and we couldn't take it back with us, so we had a case of liquor in front of it. I didn't see they was taking that out of there. Maybe they drank it up already. Before we got home, it was all gone.
The Army, he said that they took a picture with all that stuff in it, but I'm sure the Army Air Corps didn't think that was an appropriate picture, at least to put in the National Archives. While I switch the disc here, 2 quick things. First, I want to thank Greg Chartreux back there for coming and filming this tonight, this piece of history, this piece of local history. And if any of you are interested in a copy of the DVD, wait about a week and contact the Historical Society at the archives. And if you make a small donation, let's say $10, you can have one of those BDs. The last thing I want to do before we finish here is, you notice the last slide talked about the dedication to those that didn't return. Bob was one of the lucky ones. There's a lot of guys that didn't make it. Veterans Day coming up. It's important that we get out in our community and join those celebrations, those ceremonies, and recognize.
There's something that happened. A brother that was killed in the service. Did they acknowledge themselves? Right there.
It's 5 or 6 minutes long, so. And if I blare you folks out in the front row, just holler.
And other things, and it's really about those who give the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom.
I should think it would be this patriotic feeling that how proud you should be to be an American, to have that flag and what it stands for. And in my case, it just renews a pride that I did serve.
Whenever I see all the flags of Munster, it reminds me that each one of those flags represents an individual with a history and a family and the courage and the dignity and the honor to serve. That really fills me with a sense of gratitude and pride.
There's something about a small town and a parade. It's a celebration of service and honor of those who have served. It's a special day. It's a special feel. Hard to describe, but the amount of people who come to watch the parade is really gratifying. To see that many people supporting us.
I love Cedarburg because of its smallness, and people know each other by name. They often call out your name as you're walking down. You're not anonymous. I think I found the essence in enjoying the height of it all, because the first parade I marched in here in Cedarburg, which was maybe 7, 8 years ago, I cried most of the way because I had never been in a parade. And as I was marching, people were applauding and thanking us. And I felt like finally, after 35 years or so, I had come home from Vietnam.
Although there are lots of Memorial Day services in big cities, in a small town you have, I think, a feeling of togetherness and closeness and of support. This is what America is. That's what represents America, I think.
It's an honor for me to share this day of remembrance with you. For those of you who have suffered such a loss, I know your pain, I feel your loss. I have lost friends in this war whom I considered brothers, men I flew with and entrusted my life with. Those whom we memorialize here today are here as well in spirit. Their pride stands tall amongst us, their courage still undaunted, and their love of this country is as real as the wind in these trees and the waving of that flag. Take comfort knowing they now rest in a safer place.
We call your attention to the small table in front of you. This empty table symbolizes the fact that members of our armed forces are missing from our ranks. They are formally listed in our military's records as prisoners of war or missing in action. We refer to them as POWs and MIAs. They are all our comrades. They're unable to be with their loved ones and families today, so we join together to pay a humble tribute to them and bear witness to their continued absence.
The flag folding ceremony solemn demonstration which shows respect and etiquette for the flag. It helps everyone understand what the flag means. I mean, we all take it for granted. Well, yeah, it means freedom, and it means people dying for that freedom. But it means more than that. It means community. It means helping each other out. It means veterans helping veterans, and just giving back to the community.
Let me suggest that each and every one of us take time from our family celebrations to walk through Zurui or Emmanuel cemeteries to see the sea of flags that cover so many graves, like a sacred carpet of red, white, and blue. And let us thank those who lie beneath the sod, for as certainly as we live on because of their sacrifice, they will live on as long as we remember.
To me, the last 10 minutes of Saving Private Ryan explains all you need to know about Memorial Day. When the captain is dying, and he pulls Private Ryan down, and he says to him, "Earn it." That's the first part of Memorial Day, is ever remembering the veterans who have died and earned it. The it being this country, our ability to have parades, to have parties, to go picnic with our family. They have earned it. They've done their part. Now, how about the rest of us that maybe aren't serving anymore, or who are just citizens of the country? We need to walk away, everybody, from that ceremony saying, we need to earn what the veterans have already earned for us.
Little old Cedarburg. It's pretty cool, huh? Bob, thank you again very, very much for being here tonight, for sharing a piece of history with us, and thank you for your service.
Thank you for having me.
Bob's brought some of his memorabilia here, his helmet, his oxygen mask, a really neat print that at one of the reunions, someone took a pre-World War II print of Norwich, England, and superimposed a bomber from the 458th over it. His astro compass, his sextant, and this very fragile model. Please look but don't touch. And here's a map of all the bases here. So come up and ask some questions, take a look at this stuff, and thank you so much for coming.